For centuries, the Ottoman Empire stood as one of the most powerful forces on earth, spanning from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. But in the crucible of the First World War, the empire that once seemed eternal faced its greatest military catastrophe. A downfall not by a single battle but by the collapse of an age. This is the story of ambition and tragedy. The harrowing tale of a once mighty empire dragged into a war. A war that would dismantle centuries of power and redraw the map of the Middle East forever. If you're watching this right now, help me prove something wrong. My mom said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Cinematic History Files and turn on the bell icon so you won't miss any of the latest uploads. Let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. For over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire ruled 3 continents. Its armies once thundered across Europe. Its sultans commanded loyalty from Cairo to Baghdad. Its banners flew over Constantinople, the greatest city of its age. But by the dawn of the 20th century, something was terribly wrong. The empire was still vast on paper, but beneath the surface it was rotting. Slowly, quietly, and fatally, European diplomats had a name for it. They called it the sick man of Europe, not because the empire was already dead, but because everyone could see it was dying. At the heart of the problem was decay.
This route here offers the least resistance and the best cover. Agreed, but we must consider the northern flank as well.
Decades of corruption had eaten away at the state. Officials enriched themselves while provinces starved. Taxes were collected brutally, but rarely reached the capital. Railways were few. Factories were outdated. The economy was drowning in foreign debt. By the late 1800s, the Ottoman treasury was no longer its own. British and French bankers controlled its finances. European powers dictated trade. And the empire that once terrified Europe now begged it for loans. The military, once unstoppable, had also fallen behind. Ottoman soldiers still marched with courage, but courage alone no longer won wars. European armies now had machine guns, modern artillery, and rapid logistics. The Ottomans had outdated rifles, poor training, and weak supply lines. Worst of all, command was fractured. Generals argued, orders conflicted, and reforms came too late, or not at all. Inside the empire, the cracks grew wider. The Balkans burned with rebellion. Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians, once ruled by Istanbul, demanded independence. One by one, Ottoman provinces slipped away. Each loss weakened the empire further. Each retreat humiliated it more. And Europe watched closely, not with sympathy, but with hunger. Russia wanted warm water ports. Britain wanted secure routes to India. France wanted influence and prestige. They didn't ask if the Ottoman Empire would fall. They asked when, and who would carve it up first. Desperate times breed dangerous decisions. In Constantinople, a new group rose to power, the Young Turks. They promised reform. They promised strength. They promised to save the empire. But salvation would not come cheaply. They believed only one thing could restore Ottoman greatness. War. A great war. A war that would shock the world, or destroy the empire forever. As Europe drifted toward catastrophe in 1914, the Ottoman Empire stood at a crossroads. Stay neutral and be slowly dismantled by foreign powers. Or choose a side and gamble everything on the battlefield. What they did next would seal the fate of an empire older than most nations on earth. And once the first shots were fired, there would be no turning back. By the summer of 1914, Europe stood on the edge of collapse. Empires glared at one another across tense borders. Armies mobilized in silence. And a single assassination in Sarajevo lit a fuse that could no longer be extinguished. The world was drifting toward war, and the Ottoman Empire was watching. Officially, the Ottomans declared neutrality. Publicly, they claimed restraint. Privately, they knew neutrality was an illusion. To remain neutral was to invite dismemberment. To stand alone was to become prey. The empire needed a protector, and there was only one power willing to offer it: Germany. Germany did not see the Ottomans as equals. It saw them as a weapon, a way to threaten British colonies, a way to tie down Russian armies, a way to ignite unrest across Muslim lands ruled by Europe. For the Ottomans, Germany represented something else entirely: hope. German officers trained Ottoman troops. German engineers built railways toward the east. German guns modernized an aging army. And behind closed doors, secret negotiations unfolded. On August 2nd, 1914, a secret alliance was signed. No public announcement, no celebration, just ink on paper, binding the fate of a dying empire to a rising war machine. The Ottoman Empire had chosen a side, but it had not yet chosen to fight. Inside Constantinople, the decision split the leadership. Some warned the empire was not ready. Others believed war was the only path to survival. At the center of it all stood one man, Enver Pasha, young, ambitious, and dangerously confident. He dreamed of restoring Ottoman glory through decisive action, and he would not wait long. In October 1914, 2 German warships entered the Dardanelles. They were renamed, repainted, reflagged as Ottoman vessels, but they were still commanded by Germans. Then, without warning, they sailed into the Black Sea. On October 29th, Ottoman ships opened fire on Russian ports: Odessa, Sevastopol, Novorossiysk. There was no declaration of war, only explosions, only smoke rising from the sea, only silence. After the guns fell quiet, Russia responded immediately. So did Britain. So did France. Within days, the Ottoman Empire was at war with the world's greatest powers. A war it had not formally announced. A war it could no longer escape. The gamble had been made. But the empire entered the Great War unprepared. Its army was scattered across vast fronts. The supply lines were fragile. Its railways incomplete. Winter approached, and the first battlefield would be merciless. In the east, Russian forces advanced through the Caucasus. Snow-covered mountains, frozen passes, temperatures that killed faster than bullets. Enver Pasha saw opportunity. He believed a bold offensive would crush Russia and restore Ottoman pride. His generals hesitated. The weather was brutal. The troops were exhausted. Supplies were insufficient. But ambition drowned out caution. Orders were given. The Ottoman Third Army would march straight into the mountains. What awaited them there would become one of the greatest military disasters in Ottoman history. Catastrophe not yet known. A tragedy still unfolding. And as the soldiers marched into the snow, the empire marched closer to ruin. Winter came early in the Caucasus. Not gently, not quietly, came like an executioner. The mountains east of Anatolia were merciless even in summer. In winter, they were lethal. Snow buried the passes. Winds screamed through valleys like living things. Temperatures plunged far below what men or armies could endure. And yet, this was where Enver Pasha chose to strike. Enver believed destiny favored the bold. He believed speed would compensate for weakness. That surprise would replace preparation. That faith could overcome frost. His plan was daring, almost brilliant on paper. 3 Ottoman corps would encircle the Russian army near the town of Sarikamish, cutting it off completely. A decisive victory, a humiliating blow to Russia, a resurrection of Ottoman honor. But paper does not feel cold. Men do. In December 1914, nearly 90,000 Ottoman soldiers began their march. They were poorly clothed, poorly fed, and poorly informed. Many wore thin uniforms meant for temperate climates. Some had no winter boots. Others wrapped rags around their feet. Supply lines stretched impossibly thin. Communication between units was unreliable. And still, they marched. As the army climbed higher, the world turned white. Paths disappeared. Landmarks vanished. Entire units lost their way. Snowstorms erased footprints within minutes. Officers shouted orders that were swallowed by the wind. Men collapsed not from enemy fire, but from exhaustion. Those who stopped moving did not get back up. Frostbite spread like a silent disease. Hands stiffened. Feet went numb. Faces turned pale and expressionless. Rifles jammed. Artillery froze in place. Horses fell and were abandoned. Some soldiers burned their rifle stocks for warmth. Others prayed. Meanwhile, the Russians waited. They were entrenched, supplied, and fully aware of the winter's cruelty. They did not need to attack. The mountains were already doing the killing for them. Entire Ottoman units vanished into the snow. Not defeated, not captured, simply gone. Men wandered blindly through blizzards until strength failed them. Commanders lost contact with their own troops. Orders arrived days too late or not at all. By the time some units reached their objectives, there was no one left to fight. Enver Pasha remained distant from the reality on the ground. Reports were optimistic. Warnings were dismissed. Retreat was unthinkable. To turn back would be to admit failure. So the march continued. Deeper, higher, colder. By early January 1915, the truth could no longer be hidden. The offensive had collapsed, not because of Russian strength, but because of Ottoman suffering. Of the nearly 90,000 men who entered the campaign, more than half would never return. Most did not die in battle. They died alone, in silence, in the snow. The snow eventually melted, and when it did, it revealed the scale of the disaster. Frozen bodies scattered across mountain passes. Abandoned weapons. Broken supply wagons. The Third Army had been annihilated. Sarikamish was not just a defeat. It was a warning that ambition without preparation is fatal, that modern war does not forgive arrogance, and that the Ottoman Empire was no longer what it once was. But the war did not stop. The empire could not stop, and worse catastrophes were still ahead. As the bodies were buried beneath fresh snow, new enemies closed in, from the sea, from the deserts, from within. The greatest tragedy was not that Sarikamish happened, it was that the empire would learn nothing from it. While the snow still buried the dead at Sarikamish, a new threat was already forming, this time from the sea. By early 1915, the Allied powers had grown impatient. The war on the Western Front was frozen in mud and blood. Millions were locked in stalemate. They needed a breakthrough, and their eyes turned toward a narrow strip of land that guarded the gateway between East and West, Gallipoli. If the Allies could seize the Dardanelles, they could knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war, open a supply route to Russia, and strike a blow that would echo across the world. To them, Gallipoli looked weak, poorly defended, an empire already on its knees. They were wrong. At dawn on April 25, 1915, the sea came alive. Battleships lined the horizon. Transports moved silently through the mist. Thousands of soldiers prepared to land on hostile shores. British, French, Australian, New Zealander, an army assembled from across the empire. They believed the Ottomans would break quickly. They believed resistance would be minimal. They believed this would be easy. Waiting for them were farmers, students, laborers, Ottoman soldiers who knew one thing with certainty: there would be no retreat. Behind them was the sea. Behind them was Constantinople. Behind them was the empire itself. Among the defenders was a little-known officer, Mustafa Kemal. He had not been assigned to the landing zones. He had not been ordered to act. But when he heard the guns, he moved, without permission, without hesitation, toward destiny. The landings were chaos, steep cliffs, narrow beaches, confusion in every direction. Men advanced under fire they could not see. Officers fell. Units lost cohesion within minutes. The plan unraveled before the first day had ended. Mustafa Kemal reached the front just as Ottoman lines began to waver. He gathered retreating soldiers. And then, he gave an order that would echo through history. I do not order you to attack. I order you to die. Not as a demand, but as a declaration that this ground would be held at any cost. And it was. The fighting at Gallipoli became something else entirely. Not maneuver, not strategy, survival, trenches carved into rock, supply shortages on both sides, days that blurred into nights. The distance between enemies shrank to meters, sometimes to silence. The heat was suffocating, the terrain unforgiving. Disease spread faster than orders, but neither side would yield. Every hill became a battlefield, every ravine a grave. For the Ottomans, Gallipoli was no longer about victory. It was about existence. Against all expectations, they held, week after week, month after month. The Allied advance stalled, then froze. Every attempt to break through was repelled. The empire that had collapsed in the snow now stood firm on the cliffs. Gallipoli became the bloodiest campaign the Ottomans would fight in the Great War. But it also became their greatest stand. A rare moment where discipline, leadership, and sacrifice aligned. Where defeat was delayed by sheer will. By January 1916, the Allies withdrew. Quietly, carefully, defeated. Gallipoli was over. For the Ottoman Empire, it was a victory. But victory came at a terrible price. Tens of thousands would never return home. Entire generations were scarred. And while Gallipoli saved the empire for a moment, could not save it forever. Because while the world remembered Gallipoli as a heroic defense, the empire was bleeding elsewhere. In the deserts, in the cities, from within. And the next collapse would not come from the sea, but from betrayal, hunger, and fire. Gallipoli had proven one thing. The Ottoman Empire could still fight, but it revealed something far more dangerous. The empire could no longer hold itself together. While soldiers bled on distant fronts, the foundations of Ottoman rule were cracking from within. Not with explosions, but with whispers. For centuries, the Ottomans had ruled the Arab provinces through loyalty, faith, and tradition. Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Baghdad. These lands were not conquered territories. They were part of the empire's soul. But war changes loyalties, and desperation invites betrayal. As the Great War dragged on, the Ottoman government tightened its grip. Taxes increased. Food was requisitioned. Dissent was crushed. In Arab cities, resentment grew. Not always against the empire itself, but against how it was now ruled. Centralized, harsh, unforgiving. The bond between Istanbul and its Arab provinces began to fray. The British saw opportunity. They did not need to defeat the Ottomans everywhere. They only needed to break them from the inside. And so, promises were made. British agents reached out to Arab leaders. They spoke of independence, of kingdoms, of freedom after the war. They spoke in letters, in secret meetings, in shadows. And one man stood at the center of it all. Sharif Hussein of Mecca, guardian of Islam's holiest cities. Respected, powerful, and deeply conflicted. In 1916, the unthinkable happened. The Arab Revolt began. Ottoman flags were torn down in Arab lands. Railways were sabotaged. Garrisons attacked. Supply lines cut through the desert. Arab fighters, once Ottoman subjects, now fought against the empire. Not for Britain, but for a promise. The revolt was not massive at first, but it was strategic. Every train destroyed weakened Ottoman logistics. Every uprising forced troops away from critical fronts. The empire was bleeding, not from one wound, but from 1,000 small cuts. To the Ottomans, this was more than rebellion. It was betrayal. Muslim fighting Muslim. Brothers turned against brothers. The idea of a unified empire collapsed in real time. Inside the empire, fear took hold. Leaders suspected conspiracies everywhere. Loyalty tests became brutal. Trust disappeared. Arrests increased. Executions followed. The state hardened, and in doing so, fractured further. Cities began to starve. Blockades cut off food supplies. Farms were abandoned. Famine spread silently. Civilians suffered far from the front lines. The war was no longer just fought by armies. It was endured by everyone. Meanwhile, the British advanced, not with massive armies, but with coordination. Arab fighters harassed Ottoman positions. British forces struck where defenses were weakest. The empire was being pulled apart from both ends. By 1917, the Ottomans were losing control of the Arab world. Jerusalem fell. Damascus wavered. Baghdad was gone. Each city lost was more than territory. It was identity. The promises that fueled the Arab Revolt would later be broken. Borders would be drawn by foreign hands. New conflicts would be born. But for the Ottomans, that future was irrelevant. Their present was collapse. The empire that had survived Sarikamish, that had stood firm at Gallipoli, was now unraveling without a single decisive battle. No heroic last stand, just exhaustion, division, and loss of faith. By the final years of the war, the Ottoman Empire was still fighting, but it no longer believed it could win. And when belief dies, collapse soon follows. The year was 1918. The world had burned for 4 long years. And now the Ottoman Empire, once a force feared across continents, teetered on the edge of oblivion. It was not defeated in a single battle. It was exhausted, betrayed, starved, and slowly, quietly, it died. From the deserts of the Arab lands, to the mountains of the Caucasus, to the shores of the Mediterranean, the empire had fractured. Revolts, uprisings, and foreign invasions had drained its armies. Civil unrest had hollowed its cities. Hunger stalked its people. Istanbul, the imperial heart, once vibrant and commanding, now felt like a ghost city. Palaces stood empty. Markets were silent. Officials argued endlessly over decrepit maps. Trust had vanished. Hope was fragile. And yet, the world demanded one final fight. The Allies advanced. British, French, and Arab forces marched relentlessly. Germans had abandoned their posts. Russia was gone from the front. The Ottoman army was scattered, exhausted, and under-equipped. Some soldiers could barely march. Others abandoned their posts quietly, slipping away into shadows. The empire could no longer project power, could barely hold its borders. And then came the final blows. Jerusalem, Damascus, Baghdad. Each city lost was more than a strategic position. It was a piece of the empire's soul. No generals could save it. No leader could rally it. The Ottoman Empire had survived centuries, only to unravel in months. Inside Istanbul, the Sultan watched helplessly. Foreign powers dictated terms. Armistices were signed that cut the empire in pieces. And the people, soldiers and civilians alike, bore the weight of failure. The Ottoman flag still flew over the capital, but it no longer meant unity. It was a relic, a memory. By October 1918, the empire had signed the Armistice of Mudros. Its army disbanded, its territories occupied, its people exhausted, and the centuries-old empire, which had survived wars, plagues, and revolts, was gone. It was not just a political collapse. It was a human one, a cultural one, a spiritual one. An empire that had once ruled 3 continents was reduced to whispers in the streets of a dying capital. The Ottoman Empire would never rise again. Its soldiers would return home as ghosts. Its leaders would vanish into history. Its lands would be divided, carved, and claimed by foreign hands. And yet, its memory would endure. For every empire that falls, leaves behind lessons etched in blood, snow, and sand. And for the world, the Great War had proven one thing. Even the mightiest can crumble, from within and without. The Ottoman Empire may have fallen, but its story endures forever. If this journey through history moved you, Make sure to subscribe now to uncover more hidden chapters of history like this. Also like and share so that others can witness the rise and fall of empires. Comment below which moment shocked you the most, Sarikamish, Gallipoli, or the final collapse, and let us know the history you want next. The comment with the most like wins. History is not just in the past. It lives in the stories we tell.